Let's talk about excuses, because that's where the rot begins. You tell yourself you're tired, that it's too hard, that you'll start tomorrow. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Those aren't reasons, they're escapes. And every time you indulge them, you reinforce a pattern of weakness. You're not just avoiding work, you're avoiding responsibility for your own life. And that avoidance, that's the slow death of potential. It's not just about laziness, it's about fear. Fear of failure, fear of realizing you might not be as capable as you hoped, fear of the sheer weight of effort required to change. But here's the paradox: the more you run from that effort, the heavier it becomes. Because now you're not just carrying the work itself, you're carrying the shame of knowing you didn't even try. Think about it. When you make an excuse, what you're really saying is, I'm not willing to suffer now, so I'll suffer later. But the suffering of regret is infinitely worse. The suffering of discipline is temporary, controlled, purposeful. It's the pain of growth. The suffering of regret, that's eternal. It's the ghost that whispers in your ear at 3 a.m. What if you just pushed a little harder? And you can't outrun that. You can distract yourself, numb yourself, lie to yourself. But it's always there, waiting. Because deep down, you know the truth, you were capable of more. And that knowledge is a slow poison. So why do we do it? Why do we sabotage ourselves with excuses? Because it's easier to live with "I could have" than "I failed." But that's a coward's logic. Failure isn't the enemy. Complacency is. Failure is data. It's feedback. It's the universe telling you, adjust, adapt, try again. But complacency, that's surrender. And the tragedy isn't that you lost. It's that you never even stepped into the arena. You stood on the sidelines, convincing yourself you were too good to play, too smart to risk it, when in reality you were just too scared. And here's the hardest pill to swallow. The world doesn't care about your excuses. It doesn't care that you were tired, that you had a bad day, that things weren't fair. The world only responds to one thing: action. You don't get rewarded for your intentions. You don't get credit for your potential. You get what you earn. And if you're not earning, you're falling behind. Every day you spend making excuses is a day someone else spends getting stronger, smarter, sharper. While you're negotiating with yourself about why you can't, they're out there proving why they can. And soon, the gap between you and them isn't just about skill, it's about identity. They become the kind of person who does the work. You become the kind of person who talks about it. So how do you break the cycle? You start by telling the truth. No more stories, no more justifications. You look at yourself in the mirror and say, I've been lying to myself. And then you do the hardest thing of all, you act. Not tomorrow, not when you feel ready, now. Because readiness is a myth. You'll never feel ready. You'll never feel like it's the perfect time. The only way to become the person who doesn't make excuses is to stop making them today. Right now. Not because it's easy, but because it's necessary. And when you do that, when you finally take responsibility for your own life, something extraordinary happens. The excuses that once felt like shields start to feel like shackles. You realize they weren't protecting you, they're imprisoning you. And the moment you drop them, you're free. Free to fail, free to struggle, free to rise. Because now you're playing the game. Now you're in the arena, and that's where life happens. So ask yourself, what excuses are you still clinging to? And what would happen if you let them go? The price of inaction is far higher than the cost of effort. Pay it now, or pay forever, but choose. Let's confront a fundamental truth about human suffering, because not all pain is created equal. There's the pain of discipline, which is sharp but purposeful, like the burn in your muscles when you push through the last set. And then there's the pain of regret, which is dull, knowing, and relentless, the kind that seeps into your bones when you realize you've betrayed your own potential. One is the pain of growth, the other is the pain of decay. And here's what you need to understand: you will experience one of them. The choice isn't between suffering and no suffering. It's between which kind of suffering you're willing to endure. And that choice will define your life. Think about the last time you avoided something difficult. Maybe it was a workout, a tough conversation, or a project you kept putting off. In the moment, it felt like relief, didn't it? Like you'd outsmarted the system. But that relief is an illusion, a temporary anesthetic for a chronic condition. Because the weight of what you didn't do doesn't disappear, it just transfers to the future. It compounds. And one day, you wake up and realize you've been paying interest on a debt you never settled. That's the paradox of avoidance. The more you run from short-term discomfort, the more long-term misery you accrue. Now let's talk about discipline. It hurts, yes, but it's a clean hurt. It's the hurt of a wound being sterilized, not the festering of one ignored. When you force yourself to do what's necessary, even when it's hard, you're not just accomplishing a task, you're reinforcing an identity. You're telling yourself, I am someone who meets the challenge. And that identity becomes your armor against the chaos of life. Because here's what happens when you consistently choose discipline. The pain doesn't disappear, but your relationship to it changes. It stops being something you dread and starts being something you respect. You begin to understand its purpose. The athlete doesn't love the burn, they love what the burn means. It's the signal of transformation. But regret doesn't transform you. It haunts you. It's the ghost of the person you could have been, whispering in your ear at every milestone you didn't reach, every opportunity you didn't seize. And unlike the pain of discipline, which fades into pride, regret lingers. It metastasizes. It turns into resentment toward yourself, toward others, toward the world. Why didn't I start sooner? Why did I waste so much time? Those questions don't just sting, they erode your sense of agency. They make you feel like a passive observer of your own life rather than the author of it. So why do we so often choose the path of regret? Because discipline requires something that feels terrifying, immediate responsibility. It forces you to stare directly into the abyss of your own limitations and say, I will move forward anyway. That takes courage. But avoidance lets you hide. It lets you pretend, just for a little longer, that you're not the problem, that circumstances or luck or other people are the reason you're not where you want to be. But that's a delusion. And the longer you cling to it, the more you infantilize yourself. You become a child waiting for permission to act, rather than an adult who takes ownership of their life. Here's the hard truth. Time doesn't care about your excuses. It moves forward regardless. And every day you spend avoiding the pain of discipline is a day you're choosing the pain of regret. That's not speculation. It's simple math. Look at the areas where you're stagnant right now. Your career, your relationships. What are you avoiding? What conversation are you not having? What skill are you not building? Now project that pattern forward 5 years, 10 years. See the shape of that future? That's not fate. That's the consequence of choices you're making today. But here's the good news. It's not too late to change the equation. The pain of discipline is finite. It has an endpoint. The moment you complete the task, lift the weight, have the conversation. But the pain of regret, that's infinite. It grows the longer you defer the work. So ask yourself, which would you rather endure? The temporary struggle of becoming, or the permanent shadow of what might have been? The choice is yours, but choose wisely, because the clock is already ticking. You can suffer the pain of discipline now, or the pain of regret forever. One makes you stronger. The other will slowly eat you alive. Consider for a moment the anatomy of mastery. What does it really take to become exceptional at anything? Because here's something you might not want to hear: talent is wildly overrated. It's not the deciding factor. It never has been. The real differentiator, the true secret behind every champion, every virtuoso, every outlier who seems to operate on a different plane than the rest of us, is something far more mundane and far more accessible. It's the willingness to endure the invisible hours. Those solitary stretches of time when no one is watching, no one is cheering, when there are no shortcuts and no applause, just you and the work. That's where the alchemy happens. That's where ordinary transforms into extraordinary. Let's dissect this, because it's crucial. When you watch a world-class performer, whether it's an athlete, a musician, a CEO, what you're seeing is the highlight reel, the finished product, the polished surface. What you're not seeing are the thousands of hours of deliberate practice, the failures that never made it to social media, the mornings they wanted to quit but showed up anyway. You're not seeing the internal battles, the moments of doubt, the sheer monotony of repetition required to make something look effortless. That's the dirty secret of greatness. It's mostly boring. It's showing up day after day, long after the initial excitement has faded, long after your peers have gotten distracted by the next shiny thing. It's falling in love with the process, not just the outcome. Now, why is this so difficult for most people? Because we live in a culture that worships results, but despises the journey required to get there. We want six-pack abs in 30 days. We want viral success overnight. We want mastery without the apprenticeship. And when that doesn't happen, when progress is slower than we'd like, we interpret it as a sign that we're not cut out for it. That's nonsense. What it really means is that you're finally encountering the reality of what excellence demands. The plateau you're stuck on isn't proof of your inadequacy. It's the universe testing your commitment. Are you willing to keep pushing when the novelty wears off? When no one cares? When you can't yet see the light at the end of the tunnel? That's the crucible that forges real skill. Here's a psychological truth most people never grasp. Motivation follows action, not the other way around. You don't wait until you feel inspired to work. You work until you become inspired. The act of showing up consistently, even when you don't feel like it, rewires your brain. It builds what psychologists call self-efficacy, the unshakable belief that you can handle what comes at you because you've proven it to yourself repeatedly in those invisible hours. That's why discipline is far more valuable than motivation. Motivation is fickle. Discipline is durable. Motivation depends on how you feel in the moment. Discipline depends on who you've decided to be. And this brings us to perhaps the most counterintuitive insight about mastery. The people who achieve it aren't necessarily the ones with the most natural ability. They're the ones who develop what researcher Angela Duckworth calls grit, the combination of passion and perseverance over the long haul. They're the ones who understand that skill is cumulative, that every rep matters, that excellence isn't about one heroic effort, but about hundreds of small, correct actions stacked over time. The math is simple but brutal. If you're putting in 10% less than your competition every day, the gap doesn't stay at 10%. It compounds. Over weeks, months, years, it becomes an uncrossable chasm. So what's the practical takeaway? Stop waiting for perfect conditions. Stop looking for shortcuts. Embrace the grind. not as punishment, but as privilege. Because here's what no one tells you: those invisible hours, they're actually the gift. They're where you discover what you're really made of. They're where you earn the right to call yourself a professional, an artist, a contender, not because someone gave you the title, but because you've logged the work. The hours you spend alone with your craft are the hours you spend getting to know your best self. This isn't just about career success or physical achievement. It's about constructing an identity you can respect. When you look in the mirror at the end of the day, the person staring back at you knows whether you cut corners or not. They know whether you honored your potential or betrayed it. And that silent judgment, the one no one else hears, is the most important evaluation you'll ever face. The question isn't whether you have what it takes. The question is whether you're willing to spend enough time in the fire to find out. Mastery isn't about being better than others. It's about being better than the person you were yesterday, hour by invisible hour. Let's talk about time, that relentless, indifferent force that neither pauses nor rewinds. Here's what you need to understand with brutal clarity. Your future isn't some distant land you'll eventually sail to. It's being constructed right now, brick by brick, by the choices you make in this present moment. Every second you spend hesitating is another brick laid in the foundation of a life you didn't truly want. And the terrifying truth is this: indecision is still a decision. Waiting for the right time is still a choice. That clock isn't stopping, and with each tick, the cost of inaction compounds exponentially. Consider the psychological weight of procrastination. When you delay what you know you should do, you're not just postponing a task, you're initiating a silent war within yourself. Part of you knows what needs to be done, while another part rebels against it. This internal conflict drains more energy than the work itself ever would. The German philosopher Goethe captured this perfectly when he said, "Hell begins the day God grants you the vision to see all that you could have done, should have done, but did not do." That's the true cost of later. It's not just lost time, but the gradual erosion of your self-respect as you watch your own potential gather dust. Now let's examine urgency from a neurological perspective. Your brain is wired to prioritize immediate rewards over distant ones. It's why scrolling social media often beats working on your long-term goals. But here's where you can outsmart your own biology by attaching visceral, emotional weight to future consequences. Close your eyes and vividly imagine yourself 5 years from now if you continue avoiding the hard work. Feel the regret in your bones. Then flip it. Picture the pride and strength of the person you'll become if you start acting today. This isn't just visualization, it's creating neurological tension that can override your resistance. The ancient Stoics had a powerful practice called memento mori, remembering that you will die. While this might sound morbid, it's actually the ultimate antidote to complacency. When you truly internalize that your time is finite, that this breath right now is one you'll never get back, something shifts. The trivial distractions lose their grip. The excuses that once seemed reasonable now appear as what they truly are: betrayals of your own existence. This isn't about fear, it's about reverence for the gift of consciousness you've been given. Let's confront the most common objection head on, "But I'm not ready yet." Of course you're not. No one ever is. Readiness is a myth perpetuated by those who lack the courage to begin. The Roman poet Horace nailed it: begin, and the mind grows heated. Begin, and the task will be completed. Action precedes clarity, not the other way around. Those who wait for perfect conditions are still waiting, while others are halfway up the mountain. Here's the paradoxical truth about momentum: it works both ways. Every action makes the next one slightly easier, just as every avoidance makes the next effort harder. This is Newton's first law applied to human behavior. Objects in motion tend to stay in motion. Objects at rest tend to stay at rest. Your first move doesn't need to be grand, it just needs to break the stasis. Send that email. Do that first rep. Write that opening sentence. The universe rewards movement, however small. Now consider this through the lens of opportunity cost. When you choose to binge, watch instead of working on your craft, you're not just killing time, you're killing potential versions of yourself. With each hour spent passively consuming, you're actively destroying what could have been a more skilled, more accomplished you. This isn't about guilt, it's about simple arithmetic. There are approximately 112 waking hours in a week. How many of yours are being invested versus wasted? The Japanese concept of kaizen, continuous small improvements, reveals another vital insight. Massive success is nearly always the result of small, daily actions compounded over time. The person who works consistently at 80% intensity will always outperform the person who works sporadically at 200%. Why? Because reliability is its own superpower. The tortoise doesn't beat the hare by being faster. He wins by refusing to stop. Here's what separates those who dream from those who achieve: the realization that someday is code for never. The future isn't some magical realm where you'll suddenly become disciplined, motivated, and focused. The future is simply a series of nows strung together. The person you'll be in 5 years is being shaped by the person you choose to be today, not tomorrow. Today. So, I'll leave you with this stark truth right now. As you read these words, your life is already in motion. The question isn't whether you're moving, it's whether you're moving towards something or away from everything you could become. The door is open, the path is waiting, but the clock, my friend, is always ticking. Your future self is watching your present choices through the lens of time. What story will they tell about this moment?